I thought it's a good idea to look at transmission lines a bit in detail today. Transmission lines carry electric power from one substation to another. They are around us. We even fail to notice them most of the time. And believe it or not, mechanical engineers play a very, very important role in designing, building, and maintaining transmission lines. In fact, issues related to transmission lines are probably more mechanical than electrical. That's the reality. So I thought, as mechanical engineers, you should get a feel for what lies for you in case you end up going to power industry. Let's say one of the electricity boards in the country, or maybe National Thermal Power Corporation (NTPC), or Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited (BHEL), and so on. Power companies are quite a few, and mechanical engineers are actually playing leading roles there most of the time. So the basic definition for transmission line is right here. It's the long pair of conductors, and in fact, more than one conductors can also be used. This pair of conductors carries AC power at a very high voltage because that's more economical. You can transmit a lot more power when you're transmitting at very high voltage. Even though we are not generating at very high voltage, and the customers also don't normally need extremely high voltage, we still transmit at very, very high voltages using transformers on both sides. The number can be as high as 330 kilovolt. Now, most important thing, besides, of course, the mechanical issues, which I'll come to a little bit later, electrically speaking, the most important issue for transmission lines is how much power would be lost when you transmit power from one point to another. There are 4 parameters of a transmission line which are considered for figuring out losses. The conductors are made of aluminum or reinforced aluminum for mechanical reasons, because aluminum itself may not give you enough strength to survive all practical conditions. It depends. Okay. So whether it's aluminum or steel reinforced aluminum, it is going to be a conductor which will not have infinite amount of electrical conductivity. So there will be losses, ohmic losses, because of the resistance of the wires. That is number one. That is taken care of empirically by introducing a parameter called resistance or loop resistance per unit length. Also, these wires have inductance, self-inductance as well as mutual inductance. That is taken care of by defining a parameter called loop inductance per meter again. Then there will be capacitance between the wires, which is also going to be distributed. So we include a third parameter called line capacitance per unit length. And fourth possibility, it may not be there in air medium or overhead lines. Most of the time, it's not an issue. The fourth possibility remains that there may be leakage between the wires. That is accounted for by using a parameter called leakage conductance. It is denoted by capital G, and it is measured per unit length. Now, transmission lines are defined as short, medium, or long. Short transmission lines typically are 50 kilometers or less. No mathematical proof. These are practical realities. This is a nomenclature based on what we intuitively feel about the line. For short transmission lines, the voltage the sending end voltage, the generator end voltage can be as high as 20 kilovolt. Of course, the receiving end voltage will be slightly lower because of losses. Because length is not very large, capacitance effect generally is negligible. Only resistance and inductance matter when we come to calculating the expected performance of short transmission lines. These are the four parameters which I was telling you about: R, L, G, and C. Normally, for a given line, these are theoretically calculated as well as experimentally measured. Especially R and L can be measured quite easily. Equivalent circuit of a short transmission line is shown here. I am assuming it's a short line, so I'm assuming that the line is traveling along the z-axis of the coordinate system, and in the xy plane, the cross-section of the conductor's edge lying. Effect of the cross-section on the performance is being ignored, except for the fact that it will help in determining inductance, resistance, etc. But we would assume that current and voltage change only with z, the direction of travel of the signal. So if it's a short line, approximately speaking, what you do is you take the value of R, which is known to you, multiplied by the length of the line, put it in the series, value of L, which is also known, multiplied by delta Z, the length of the line, put it in series. Value of G and C are also multiplied by delta Z, and that effect is put in parallel to capture the realities. Okay. This is an approximate equivalent circuit with transmission line. Now, the nomenclature is simple enough. Sending end or generator end voltage is Vs. Receiving end voltage, everything is per phase. Even if it is a three-phase system, we will be looking at one phase as far as the equivalent circuit is concerned. Other phases can be determined, the performance of the other phases can be determined by introducing suitable phase shift in the results. So sending end and receiving end voltages are Vs and Vr. Sending end current is Is, receiving end current is IR, and delta Z is the line length. All voltage and current values are RMS values unless mentioned otherwise. Medium transmission lines are typically between 50 kilometer and 150 kilometers long. The voltages are higher, 20 kilovolt to 100 kilovolt. In this case, all the four parameters may become critical in the equivalent circuit. And long transmission lines are, of course, those which are greater than 150 kilometers in length. Voltages can be even higher than 100 kilovolt. Here also, all the four parameters of the line are important. Okay. Because in the equivalent circuit, you are multiplying the parameters by delta Z, the length of the line. So even if some parameter is small, if delta Z is large enough, the total effect will become noticeable. Now, from the practical point of view, we define something called transmission efficiency, eta T, which is simply 100 multiplied by received power divided by sent power in percentage. And received power and sending end power is Vs Is cos phi s, where cos phi s is the power factor of the sending end, and received power is VRIR cos phi r watts. We are talking only real powers here. Reactive power is not being considered in this definition. Okay. Fairly straightforward things. Power factor is simply cosine of the phase difference between voltage and current at that particular end. Power factor can be anywhere between 0 and 1. If it is 0, you are really unhappy. That means no real power is being delivered. If it is 1, you will be extremely happy. That means there is no reactive power. Entire power is real power. Typically, a power factor of 0.8 is considered good enough for most practical purposes. 1 is impossible to obtain for real life because most of the loads are not purely resistive. Another term which we will be using later on also in several other contexts is voltage regulation. It is the magnitude of the sending end voltage minus magnitude of the receiving end voltage. No phase difference here. Divided by magnitude of the receiving end voltage and multiplied by 100 in percentage. Voltage regulation should be as small as possible. 5 to 10% is generally acceptable. Higher power factors help in improving efficiency as well as voltage regulation. If voltage regulation and efficiency are not good enough, that means voltage regulation is not close to zero. It is very high compared to zero, let's say 20% or so. And transmission efficiency is not 100%, but let's say 75% or something. Then you may want to use capacitors in parallel with the load as well as with the generators to improve power factors. We'll come to all that later also when we talk about generators in particular. Okay. So there are methods to improve power factor in real life. Now, with this in mind, how do you calculate these four parameters, RL, GC? Give me 1 minute. These four parameters, RL, GC, can be mathematically determined. Laws of electrostatics and laws of magnetism have been used to figure out approximate formulas for calculating L and C, and R can be calculated using Ohm's law modified, and G can also be calculated using electrostatic laws. I don't want you to worry about derivations. I want you to get a feel for the numbers. Two-wire line is the simplest possible line. Telephone wire, by the way, transmission lines are not used only for power transmission. They are also used for carrying telephonic signals. Power systems will work at 50 hertz or 60 hertz in US. But telephone lines will work at frequencies of the order of kilohertz. In fact, on one side of the road, mostly you see telephone lines as well as power lines together. Sometimes power lines can be on the other side of the road or slightly away from the road. Telephone lines generally are on one side of the road. Okay, so two-wire lines are commonly used for telephonic signals for sure. Even for power lines, they are quite common. Now, suppose I have two wires with a diameter of 2a each and the distance between them being capital D. The formula for calculating inductance per unit length is this. I have a document here which has the derivation also, but I don't think you should be too much obsessed with derivation. I want you to have a feel for the numbers. Mu is obviously permeability of the medium, which is 4 pi multiplied by 10 raised to the power minus 7 Henry per meter for air. Cos hyperbolic inverse function is involved, which actually can be done on a calculator. It is possible to do cos hyperbolic inverse calculation on a calculator. When it comes to calculating C, this is the formula. Here, epsilon prime is the real part of the permittivity of the medium, which is approximately 8.854 multiplied by 10 raised to the power minus 12 farad per meter for air. This famous factor, cos hyperbolic inverse of D by 2a, is present in the formula for L, in the formula for C, as well as in the formula for G. In the formula for G, we have the imaginary part of the permittivity, which is almost zero for air. For air, capital G is normally zero, unless there is a breakdown and there is a serious discharge between the wires. That's a different story. It can happen during lightning storms, etc. In fact, like it or not, that kind of effect is known as corona effect. Corona is the lightning around the the conductors. It is especially seen in the night time sometimes, when you can see it with your naked eye, that there's a lot of glowing around the conductors, especially high voltage conductors. It is called corona. Okay. So corona effect is there. It is shown in one of my PPTs also somewhere. But anyway, you don't have to worry about it normally. Normally G is 0. The resistance is calculated using a concept called surface resistance divided by pi multiplied by radius of the wire. And I'll come to that surface resistance RS in a minute. The permeability mu is in Henry per meter, permittivity is in Farad per meter. If it's a lossy medium, then mu and epsilon will be complex numbers. For real media, they are real numbers. For the lossless media, they are real numbers. Now, if the RS value is given by this formula, omega is 2 pi f, mu for air medium is mu naught, sigma is the conductivity of the material with which wires are being made. That would be known to you. There's a related factor called skin depth. It measures how deeply or how deep the signal is penetrating the conductors. You don't have to worry too much about this for calculating RS. RS can be calculated directly by using equation 5. But there is a formula relating skin depth to RS, which is also given here for reference. Most of these things are for your reference. As mechanical engineers too, you may have to depend on these formulas, especially if you end up in power companies. Okay. Basic electricity and magnetism, there is something called dielectric constant, which is permittivity of the medium divided by permittivity of air or permittivity of free space. You know all this, I think. So I'm repeating things for the sake of quick reference. Now let's look at a problem, a real life problem, and see how these numbers look. An overhead transmission line comprising two parallel aluminum conductors, and the conductivity of this is electrical conductivity, not thermal conductivity. I'll be talking about thermal conductivity also in the second half of the course when I come to electric heating. But right now we are talking electrical conductivity. So electrical conductivity for aluminum is given as 3.816 multiplied by 10 raised to the power 7 mho per meter, ohm inverse. It is also known as Siemens per meter. These guys have 1.5 centimeter diameter. Each of them has 1.5 centimeter diameter. The separation between them is 1 meter. And the frequency of operation is 50 hertz. And the length of the line is 100 kilometers. They want you to draw an approximate equivalent circuit of the line. So essentially, you first need to calculate R, L, G, and C, and then multiply them by the length of the line, and then figure out the equivalent circuit. That's the whole idea. I have done the calculations. You can go through them later also. It's air medium, so mu is simply mu naught, 4 pi multiplied by 10 raised to the power minus 7 Henry per meter. Epsilon has only a real part, imaginary part is 0. Loop inductance, the formula was mu divided by pi, okay, multiplied by cos hyperbolic inverse of that factor. So mu is 4 pi into 10 raised to the power minus 7 divided by pi gives you 4 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 7 cos hyperbolic inverse of 1 meter divided by 1.5 centimeter. That gives me, if I convert meter into millimeter and centimeter also in millimeter, then I get 1000 divided by 15. You can do this calculation on the calculator. I found that the cos hyperbolic inverse of 1000 divided by 15 turns out to be approximately 4.8928. We need that in 3 of the calculations. So plug in the values, you see the order. This is a real life case almost. The inductance value is in microhenries per meter. For short lines, it is almost negligible. It will have almost negligible effect, depending on how accurate you want your modeling to be, of course. Capacitance also, it doesn't need, it also needs this cos hyperbolic inverse calculation. This is the formula, equation 2. You don't have to memorize these formulas. Let me tell you, if you need them, they'll be supplied to you. I want you to implement the formulas, which is more critical. As engineers, you have to have a feel for numbers. So equation 2 needs to be applied to figure out capacitance per unit length. I have put all the values, double check my calculations. This turns out to have the orders of picofarad per meter, even smaller than, much smaller than inductance in a way. For short transmission lines, this definitely will be almost having no effect. How about R? For calculating R, you need to first calculate RS using equation 5. Omega is 2 pi f, mu is mu naught, sigma is also given. Check my calculations for sure. RS, by putting all the values, also turns out to be in micro ohms, very small value. Delta S you don't need. I have only calculated it for the reference purposes. What it means is that the signal will mostly be limited. The current flowing in the conductor will be localized within this distance from the periphery of the conductor. So this will almost cover the entire conductor. Skin depth means how much of the cross section is effectively being used by the current. For very high frequency, delta S is very small. So current mostly concentrates only on the outer part of the cross section. But for lower frequencies, current probably is distributed throughout the cross section. That is what delta S is showing. Don't worry about delta S if you're not sure, just ignore it. R can be calculated directly from RS using this formula, RS divided by pi A. A is known to you. So if I plug the values in, R also turns out to be in micro ohm per meter. Very small values. Now, of course, G is 0 because for G, I have got epsilon double prime in the formula, which is 0 for air under normal conditions. So capital G is 0. What you do now is multiply these parameters by the length of the line, which is 50 kilometers, to get the total parameter for that length. So L into delta X, now I'm calling it delta X, not delta Z, not a big issue in me. L is known to you, multiplied by 50 kilometers, sorry, it's 100 kilometer line, I'm sorry. Okay, so 100 kilometer converted to meter and L value in Henry per meter. The total inductance of the line turns out to be 0.19571 Henry. 100 kilometer line has approximately 0.2 Henry inductance. You calculate the corresponding reactance by using 2 pi FL formula. It turns out to be about 61.48 ohm. Resistance also is multiplied by the length. The total resistance of the line is around 9.653 ohm. Total capacitance similarly turns out to be 0.5685 microfarad. It is still quite small. And you take the reactance of the capacitor, which is 1 upon 2 pi FC, you get around 5.6 kilo ohm. This is going to be in parallel in the equivalent circuit. So the equivalent circuit essentially has a series resistance of 9.653 ohm, a series reactance, which is the inductance effect, of 61.48 ohm. And in parallel, I have got only a capacitance. If G were not 0, then I would have shown a very high resistance in parallel. But G is 0, so don't worry. So capacitance, of course, it has minus reactance, you know. So minus J 5.6 kilo. This is how an approximate equivalent circuit can be written for a practical transmission line. Then you can do the calculations using simple circuit theory and predict the performance. Okay. Now, some more practical info on transmission lines. I'll show you a very big document. Don't worry about reading everything. First of all, this is how transmission lines look like. You have seen them, I'm sure, hundreds of times. See how much mechanical engineering is involved. All these towers are primarily mechanical engineer's headache. The support system for the conductors, the material for the conductor. When wind blows, these conductors sway. How much sway would be there? Would it be tolerable? In fact, because of gravitational effect, sag also happens in the conductors. Almost 70 or 80% of the issues related to transmission lines are mechanical engineers' headache. That's why I'm showing you all this. You will have to appreciate all this. Towers are very expensive, but fortunately we have come up with a very economical design nowadays, which is replicated. Not only one, there are several kinds of designs, but they are standard by now. Okay. Other method of laying transmission lines, which is also being used in Jaipur also right now, is underground cables. It has its own disadvantages as well. I mean, maintenance is more of a headache, repairing is more of a headache. But telephone lines are slowly being moved underground. So be aware that overhead as well as underground transmission lines are being used nowadays. Formulas for calculating RLGC will be the same. Only thing is, for underground situation, the permittivity will not be 8.854 into 10 raised to the power minus 12 farad per meter. It will have to be multiplied by some number, which is the dielectric constant of the earth. But anyway, don't worry about it right now. More important is that besides 2 wire lines, 3 wire lines are also possible. Formulas for RLGC have been derived. You don't have to worry about derivations. Just an example. 3-phase systems actually use 3 wires, obviously. In fact, a 4th wire may also be necessary in case of a star system. A neutral wire will also have to be run. Then you will need 4 wires, not 3. But formulas are available. This is a very big document. I will quickly run through it. I'll send it to you for your reference. Lot of derivations, current carrying capacity calculations, frequency effect, temperature effect. Sometimes, in fact, most of the time, a lot of conductors are bundled together with insulation on each conductor to make a bigger conductor. That requires different formulas for calculating RLGC. All that is given in this chapter. It's a very extensively written chapter, and the primary target here was the industry people. But you may still find it very interesting. Don't worry about remembering any of this. This is more for your information for future. This is how bundling is done. Several individual wires coming together in a bundle, they are called strands. Okay. And insulators are there in between to make sure wires don't get short-circuited to each other. Different formulas here for everything. 2 wire, 3 wire, 4 wire. 3 possibilities are shown here. Generally, these are enough for most practical purposes. Formulas for RLGC are available for all the cases. For 2 wire case, we have seen the formulas already. Current carrying capacity can be calculated for a given wire. Formulas are around. Inductance, etc., can be calculated. I am quickly rushing through it. Keep this document with you. You never know. You may need it again in future. A lot of formulas for inductance, capacitance, etc. Yeah. I use this as a reference all the time when I need something about transmission lines. Earth's effect can also be there on the capacitance. So formulas have been derived to include that if necessary. Especially for telephonic cables, it may be important. For power lines, maybe not. Lot of cables, standard cables are available in market. This is a very big list. This is aluminum with steel reinforcement, which may be necessary in practical situations when you expect a lot of stress to be induced in the material because of wind, etc. Don't worry about remembering any of this. Just be aware that engineers select standard cables rather than demanding unique cables from the market. Aluminum cables are also there. In some cases, aluminum may be enough. It is light, and it is cheap also. So in some cases, maybe if you want to go only for aluminum cables, you have standard sizes available there also. Okay, I'm going to ignore all these tables. This chapter is done. Next one is again, in fact, now it is focusing more on mechanical engineers' challenges. Sag is one of the big issues. Tension in the conductor, because if the tension is too high, conductor might start having defects and it might even break, which will lead to accidents. And sag is the gravitation's effect on the behavior. Generally, we model it using a parabolic equation. Don't worry about mathematics. Appreciate the bigger picture. Okay? Equations are available to calculate the sag for a given transmission line. Your objective is that in the worst case, the sag should be such that the wire still doesn't touch anything. That there is a safe distance between the lowest point in the parabola and any nearby object. Trees, whatever you can imagine in real life, should be far away from the lowest point in the parabola. It's common sense, There are a lot of formulas. By the way, in real life, despite your best effort, the conductors are never circular in cross section. They have non-circular shape. To take care of that for practical calculations, industry has come up with a concept called geometric mean radius, GMR, which is specified by the vendor. What it means is that if the shape were perfectly circular, how much radius you should be using effectively to calculate RLGC and other things. So GMR will be seen in a lot of these discussions. It is simply effective radius of the wire. That means even if the wire is not perfectly circular, you can assume it to be circular with that GMR value, approximately. Okay. Inclined spans are there. This is in hilly areas. This is always there. The two nearby towers may not be of the same height. So more mathematics has been done there to figure out sag, etc., and tension in the wire. Okay. I'm not trying to scare you here. This is info that engineers need most of the time in power companies at least. Another thing, ice. Even in this country, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Kashmir, there are areas where ice formation can seriously damage or seriously affect the performance of transmission lines. Effective diameter goes up. Even the value of permittivity that we were assuming as permittivity of air may have to be changed because of ice formation. It's a complicated topic, but at least appreciate that ice can play havoc with transmission lines. Okay. Wind is another story. Large wind speeds can sway the line back and forth. If your design is not done well, lines may break, causing severe damage. Fortunately, in power systems, we have learned enough by now that if something goes wrong, there are protection devices in substations, in the generator itself, which shut down the system right away. It's all automatic nowadays. But even then, you never know. So you better take all this into account when designing transmission line. Is a particular transmission line going to be located in icy areas? Icy means ICY, the areas where ice is expected. Or is it going to be in, say, Jaisalmer area where wind is very large, wind speed is very large? One thing which is not mentioned here is earthquakes. During earthquakes, will the line survive? Generally, it doesn't. But you try your best to come up with an earthquake-proof design for towers. I hope you can imagine this is a mechanical engineer's nightmare, designing, building, and maintaining transmission lines. Of course, electrical engineers also play their own role, because this is an area where mechanical engineers and electrical engineers have to work hand in hand all the time to solve problems. Okay, so formulas are there for almost everything. Conductor tension limits, sag, how much tension will be induced by the slag itself. A lot of calculations are there. With time, the lines get elongated because of temperature, etc. So sag changes also. You have to predict that in advance. In 20 years from now, will the sag be same or will it be very different? Typically, lines are supposed to survive 20 to 50 years. After that, they may need replacement. Corrosion is not shown in this document. That is one serious issue. Effect of atmosphere on the behavior of the material is very important. There are no equations, unfortunately, for that, I think. Okay, temperature effect, of course, is there. At minus 40 degrees Celsius, which places like Leh can see, versus plus 48 degrees Celsius that Jaisalmer sees, your line should be able to withstand all that. Performance should not change too much. Line should not break. It should not develop defects. It's all material science, really. That change due to ice loading, a lot of formulas are there for everything. A lot of graphs also to help you out for practical designs. I think I'm going to stop this document now. Engineers in real life use tables also in addition to equations to do the designs. In fact, nowadays simulation tools are also around, although they are not shown in this diagram, in this document. A lot of simulation is done in advance. Okay, so we are almost at the end of this document. It's a big document, unfortunately. Yeah, practical considerations. In fact, even I don't understand everything here. Uplift, I don't know what they mean. Suspension structure. You may relate to all this more than I can. Installation, stringing methods, there's too much information here. Okay. Yeah. Let's quickly get it over with. Too much practical info. The last thing in this document is problem 1 repeated for an underground line. You don't have to do it, but I thought I'll at least include it here. What I have assumed is that if the same problem is repeated when the two wires are underground, what will happen? What happens is dielectric constant of Earth approximately is 51.5. It may change, of course, but I'm assuming a value which is a nominal value. And in this case, the imaginary part of epsilon is also unfortunately not going to be 0. So that info is also given to you. It is customary to define something called loss tangent for a lossy dielectric. It is the ratio of the imaginary part of the permittivity to the real part. That is given to you. So with that information, inductance will not change. The same formula that we were using will continue to apply, because underground, I'm hoping that Earth has no magnetic effect. If you are underground, mu would still be mu naught. So you'll get the same value for L. That's my guess. Capacitance will change, because now whatever value we got in problem 1 will have to be multiplied by dielectric constant, which is 51.5. So the new value will be this. Okay. Loop resistance will not change because conductivity of the aluminum would be the same whether you are underground or overhead. So this number will not change. And leakage conductance cannot be zero anymore. It will have a value 0.2 multiplied by epsilon naught epsilon r. You can check the calculations later, but most important part is how the equivalent circuit would look like. You will have to figure out the four RLGC values, multiply them by the length of the line, and then convert to equivalent reactances. Now the equivalent circuit will also have a parallel very high resistance. That's the difference underground. One more component will have to be added in the equivalent circuit. Don't have to worry too much about it, but I thought I'll let you know anyway.